Hi, my name is Abel Christensen, and today I will be talking to you about the topic of unlucky zip codes. The purpose of this presentation is to bring awareness of what's going on in Wisconsin right now, and to also reinstate a policy and restart the policy of which Chapter 220 schools will be refunded with better funding and mandatory to participate by all Wisconsin schools. How would you feel if you wanted a better education for yourself and you were denied? Not because of your gender and not because of your grades, but because of where you live. Today I want to bring awareness to the fact that all children need equal education and fair education no matter where they live. In order to do that, we must restart the Chapter 220 program with better funding and mandatory participation. We can do that by covering these main points that I will talk to you about today. School attendance is based on zip code, the arguments against Chapter 220 schooling, and lastly, how diversity helps all students throughout school. Now, depending on where you had the opportunity to go to school, you may not know what Chapter 220 is. Luckily for me, I had the opportunity to go to a school with those same stipulations. A Chapter 220 school is a school program that provides school and busing for black students to suburban schools and white students to city schools. Those city schools that were bused out for white students, specialty schools were created for those students to draw white students to come to schools in the city. Those specialty schools included School of the Arts, School of the Engineering, into which those were created because the population and the percentage of white students attending city schools were dropping increasingly from 1975, where the participation rate was 60%, and 10 years later to where it dropped to 35%. I first want to talk to you about the statistics of what's going on. In 1976 and 1977, the first year that it was enacted, the Chapter 220 program was enacted, there were only 323 black students bused to suburban schools and 10 white students bused to city schools. In 1989 and 1990, 6,000 kids were bused to suburban schools and 1,000 white kids were bused to city schools. Now, 2013 and 2014, when the program was cut, open enrollment was added, to which 79 students got accepted into 8 schools. Now, if you do the math, that's only 9 students, no color, mandatory, that were accepted into 8 schools. Now, for you, those of you who don't know what open enrollment is to which a school gets to decide who they will accept and not accept to join their school. It is not focused on racial integration. It is more focused on income-eligible kids. Although it was working so well, why did schools feel the need to cut this program when segregation is still a big topic in today's society? I want to talk to you about some of the reasons that the program got cut and some of the arguments that people make into which Chapter 220 schools are no longer needed. First is funding. Funding became a big problem with busing so many kids back and forth, and schools just couldn't pay for it. Another reason would be busing. Busing for most students would take an hour to over an hour and a half for some students to get to school. Another reason that people argue that Chapter 220 schools are not a way to go is that some students could lose their identity. Taking a kid away from their home to go to school may affect some students. And lastly, there was a rule put in place that once schools hit 30% minority enrollment, they were no longer allowed to accept any new students. How did we get here? Pretty crazy, right? I want to talk to you about how diversity helps children in all schools no matter where they go and no matter where they go in life. I first want to talk to you and show you a video of how diversity may help students in life.
America's schools are far too segregated, both by class and race. Why is that a bad thing? Because integrated schools benefit students, our communities, and our democracy. How? Let's start in the classroom. In this integrated classroom, Imani, Dante, and Quinn are likely to have higher test scores, will develop better critical thinking and problem-solving skills, are more likely to enroll in college, and are less likely to drop out of school. The benefits don't stop there. Outside the classroom, they are more likely to seek out diverse neighborhoods, workplaces, and communities, and are better equipped to resist racial bias and harmful stereotypes, making them more engaged citizens overall. The good news? Our research shows that the number of students in school districts and charter schools taking steps to increase diversity has nearly doubled since 2007. But that isn't nearly enough to reach the millions of students still in segregated classrooms. So let's work together to promote diversity in all schools. It's good for all of us.
All right. After watching that video, you can tell just how important diversity is in America's society and just how necessary it is in today's society. I first want to talk to you about diversity. Attending a diverse school can reduce racial biases and stereotypes that we see on a daily basis. Diverse classrooms also prepare students for when they shall get to college. I want to talk to you about grades. Integrated classrooms encourage critical thinking, problem solving, and it allows more students to be ready to enroll in college. Integrated schools also help the racial achievement gap through all schools. Lastly, I want to talk to you about college. Students in integrated schools are more likely to enroll in college because they will feel comfortable with the people around them, and they will go on to have better jobs, better health, and are less likely to get incarcerated. But to do this, we need a solution and we need a plan. My plan is for a policy to be put in place for Chapter 220 schools to be restarted with better funding and mandatory. Now you ask, why does this need to be implicated? For us to truly come together, we all have to come together, no matter the race, no matter the grades, and no matter where you live. If we ever want to get better as a society, we all have to come together and love one another. And that can start by putting each other in schools together. Now lastly, what will be the outcome of this? I want to tell you the outcomes of this are uncountable. You can't count these. First, I want to talk about togetherness. Bringing so many different cultures together and having them go to school every day has not only been scientifically proven to benefit kids, but also is needed in our society. I also want to talk to you about grades. With better funding and better educations available, more people will get better grades and be better suited when they want to go to college. I want to review to you what we've talked about today. We've talked about schools being based on zip codes, the arguments that are against Chapter 220, and lastly, we talked about diversity and how it can be beneficial to kids. I want to restate my thesis. Every school and every kid deserves to have an equal and fair education. We do that by installing a policy in which schools are better funded and mandatory required to participate in. I want to leave you on this last note. Whether it's your child or someone else's child, everyone deserves a fair education. I want to leave you on this final quote so that you may think about this when you go home. Social justice is not a topic that people are willing to stand up for in an arena anymore. Thank you.